Security, get this woman out of here before she lifts a wallet from one of our guests. Catherine Thorne's sharp, cultured voice sliced through the opulent lobby of the Atherton Grand Hotel in Chicago. The Chanel bag on her arm, a cool $6,000 accessory, swung emphatically as she grabbed Eliana Vance's forearm, her acrylic nails pressing into dark skin. "I don't give a damn what pathetic invitation you forged at a copy shop," Catherine hissed, her voice pitched for the audience of gathering executives. "You people are always trying to get into places where you are not welcome." Eliana felt the burn of 40 pairs of eyes on her. The registration desk attendant quickly stepped back, his face a mask of neutrality. Two uniformed security guards started moving toward them, their hands inching toward the radios on their belts. In the crowd, smartphones rose like periscopes, their lenses eagerly recording the unfolding scene. A man in a tailored Zegna suit laughed condescendingly. "She's probably looking for the restrooms to clean them." Catherine's grip on Eliana's arm became a vice. "Precisely," Catherine added, playing to her supporter. "The service entrance is in the back alley, sweetheart, with the rest of the staff." Eliana's hands began to shake, not from fear, but from the immense effort it took to remain silent and composed. The laptop case slung over her shoulder suddenly felt like it was filled with lead. Inside it, her phone was vibrating incessantly with notifications from her legal department and the members of her board. The large digital clock above the hotel registration desk glowed with red digits. Executive session scheduled to commence in 8 minutes. Have you ever witnessed a moment of pure, unadulterated prejudice? A moment where someone, with a few carelessly cruel words, sets fire to their own future. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion, both horrifying and impossible to look away from. What goes through a person's mind to risk everything on a foundation of hate? Catherine's perfectly manicured fingers were a punishing clamp around Eliana's wrist. The grand crystal chandeliers of the Atherton Grand cast long, distorted shadows across the faces of the onlookers. Some showed curiosity, others discomfort, but a great many were already documenting the incident. "Ma'am, I need you to please let go of my arm," Eliana said, her voice a low murmur, yet clear and steady despite the hammering in her chest. Catherine let out a laugh that sounded like a shattering champagne flute. "Or what? You'll threaten me with your public defender?" She spun to face the executives, now a captive audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a perfect example of why we require more stringent security measures at our functions." The hotel manager, a gaunt man in his late 50s named Mr. Dubois, scurried out from an office behind the concierge desk. His gaze flicked between the two women, the immaculately dressed, affluent white woman and the plainly attired black woman, and his professional allegiance was instantly formed. "Is there an issue here, Mrs. Thorne?" His tone was slick with the practiced deference saved for the hotel's most valuable clientele. "This woman is attempting to infiltrate our private breakfast summit," Catherine declared, finally dropping Eliana's arm only to step closer, invading her personal space. "She's carrying a rather obvious fake invitation and is refusing to vacate the premises. Executive session commences in 7 minutes." Eliana calmly reached into her leather portfolio, moving with a slow and deliberate grace, and pulled out the invitation. It was printed on heavy, cream-colored cardstock, the lettering embossed in gold foil. She offered it to Mr. Dubois without speaking. He gave it a cursory, dismissive glance. "Ma'am, I am going to have to ask you to please wait over by the main entrance while we confirm the authenticity of this document." "Confirm what exactly?" The voice belonged to Darlena Petrova, the CEO of a major biotech firm, who had been observing the scene from near the elevator bank. She approached with a brisk, confident stride, holding her own identical invitation. "These invitations are all standardized. They came from the same printer, in the same batch." Catherine whirled on her, Lena, please don't be so naive. Anyone can replicate a piece of paper. Can they? Dr. Petrova held the two invitations up, side by side. Same embossed seal, same specific watermark when held to the light, same font family, and the same format for the RSVP code. She looked Catherine dead in the eye. Are you suggesting she's running an international counterfeiting ring for a C-suite breakfast meeting? A few of the executives began to shift their weight, their expressions souring. The phones kept recording. Somewhere near the back, a woman whispered to her friend, "This is getting incredibly ugly." Executive session commences in 6 minutes. A pink flush crept up Catherine's neck and bloomed on her cheeks, visible even under her expensive foundation. Listen, I am simply trying to maintain the integrity of our private event. We cannot just have random people wandering in. Random people? Dr. Petrova's eyebrows shot up. Or do you mean black people? A profound silence fell over the lobby, so complete that the subtle whir of the hotel's ventilation system became audible. Even the hotel staff seemed frozen in place. Catherine's mouth flapped open and closed, unable to form a coherent sentence. That's not… I never said that. You didn't need to. The new voice was a deep baritone belonging to Julian Reed, a venture capitalist Eliana recognized from the covers of several business magazines. He stepped into the circle, his dark skin creating a powerful visual alliance with Eliana. We all heard exactly what you said. You people. The service entrance. Do you want me to keep going? A strange sense of calm washed over Eliana. She knew this moment, the critical juncture where every person present had to make a choice. Some would stand for what was right. Some would fade into the background. And some, inevitably, would double down on being on the wrong side of history. Catherine, predictably, chose the latter. Fine, she snapped, retrieving her smartphone from her bag. Since the hotel staff seems incapable of handling this situation, I'll contact the police myself. Criminal trespassing is still a crime. The word crime echoed in the cavernous space. Several executives took an involuntary step back. Dr. Petrova just shook her head, a look of profound disgust on her face. Julian Reed raised his own phone and made sure the record button was active. Ma'am, please, there is no need to escalate things, Mr. Dubois pleaded, his tone suggesting he was far more concerned about a viral scandal than any notion of justice. But Catherine was already on the phone. Yes, I require police assistance at the Atherton Grand Hotel. There is an unauthorized individual attempting to force her way into a private corporate function. Eliana's phone vibrated against her hip. She glanced at the screen. Incoming call. Mark Esposito, Chief Legal Officer. Another vibration. Incoming call. David Chen, Head of Corporate Security. A third buzz. Incoming call. Nexus Dynamics Board Emergency Line. She silenced them all. Instead, she opened a notes application on her own device and began to type. She documented every word Catherine had uttered, every hostile action, and the names of every witness. She noted the hotel manager's immediate deference to Catherine, timestamping the entire sequence of events. Her extensive legal training had hammered home a single principle. Documentation is your shield and your sword. The drama continued to escalate around her. Catherine paced back and forth while on the line with the 911 dispatcher, her voice rising as she gave a description of Eliana that was a masterclass in coded language, painting her as simultaneously threatening and destitute. Yes, she is approximately 5'7", African-American female, looks to be in her late 20s, and she's wearing very inexpensive-looking clothes. No, I don't believe she's armed. But with these people, you just never know. It's a chilling moment, isn't it, when the bystanders have to choose their sides? You can almost see the moral calculus happening behind their eyes. Some step forward, joining Dr. Petrova and Julian Reed, their body language a silent rebuke of Catherine's prejudice. But look closer. Others quietly move to stand near Catherine, not speaking, but nodding in agreement. Their silent support is almost more sinister than her loud bigotry. It's a stark reminder that silence in the face of injustice is a choice, and it's a choice that emboldens the aggressor. In that lobby, who would you have stood with? The chime of the elevator announced a new set of actors. 2 Chicago police officers entered the lobby, their expressions world-weary. They looked as if they'd much rather be having coffee and a donut. The taller officer, whose nameplate read Miller, surveyed the tense scene. "We got a call about a trespasser?" Catherine strode forward, her high heels clicking like castanets on the polished marble. "Yes, officer. Thank you for arriving so promptly. This woman is trying to illegally access our private corporate summit. She's carrying a counterfeit invitation and is refusing to leave." Officer Miller's eyes fell on Eliana, then scanned the crowd of people in $1,000 suits, and then returned to Eliana in her simple, elegant blazer and slacks. His face was a mask of practiced neutrality, but his eyes held a flicker of weary recognition. He'd seen this play out 100 times before. "Ma'am," he said to Eliana, his voice polite but firm, "I need to see your identification and the invitation you have for this event." Eliana nodded silently and reached into her portfolio. As her fingers located her wallet and the invitation, they brushed against something else. A small, hard rectangle with a slightly raised texture. Her VIP all-access badge, the one that identified her not as a guest, but as something else entirely. She held on to that for now. Timing, she knew, was the most crucial variable. She handed Officer Miller her Illinois driver's license and the invitation. "Everything here appears to be perfectly valid," Officer Miller stated after a moment, looking at Catherine. "Ma'am, based on this, I see no legal grounds for a trespassing complaint." Catherine's face went from pink to a blotchy crimson. "That's ludicrous. Just look at her. Does she look like she belongs at a C-suite executive breakfast?" The question hung in the charged air, ugly and sharp. Everyone in that lobby understood the real question she was asking, and every phone in the lobby captured the moment she asked it. Officer Miller's jaw clenched. His partner, Officer Garcia, took a step toward Catherine. "Ma'am, could you please clarify what you mean by that?" And in that precise moment, with the distant wail of another siren cutting through the city air and a dozen cameras documenting her every move, Eliana Vance made a calculated decision that would alter the course of everyone's day and Catherine Thorne's entire life. She calmly pulled out her business card. The card seemed to flutter from Eliana's fingers, a small white rectangle that could have been either a flag of surrender or a declaration of total war. Catherine snatched it out of the air before Officer Miller could move. Her eyes darted across the minimalist black lettering, and for a heartbeat, her face was a blank slate of confusion. "Eliana Vance, Chief Executive Officer," she read aloud. Then she scoffed. The sound was brittle, like ice cracking under pressure. "CEO of what? Your little craft shop on Etsy? A house cleaning service?" The crowd, sensing another escalation, pushed in closer. Dr. Petrova peered over Catherine's shoulder to read the card, and her eyes widened in dawning comprehension. Julian Reed adjusted his position, his phone's camera zooming in. "Nexus Dynamics," Catherine continued, her voice dripping with mockery. "Never heard of it. Must be another one of those 2-bit startups operating out of a garage." She held the card aloft as if it were Exhibit A in a legal proceeding. "Officer, this is proof of what I've been saying. This woman is clearly delusional if she believes—" "Ma'am." Officer Miller's voice was firm, cutting through Catherine's tirade. "May I see the card?" Reluctantly, Catherine surrendered it. Miller examined it under the lobby light. The heavy linen cardstock, the raised thermographic print, the discreet holographic strip embedded along the bottom edge. His partner, Officer Garcia, leaned in. "That's high-grade work," Garcia murmured. "Corporate security issue." "So what?" Catherine's voice pitched higher. "Anyone can get fancy business cards printed." But a subtle shift had occurred in the lobby's atmosphere. Dr. Petrova was now looking at Eliana with an expression of stunned recognition. Julian Reed had lowered his phone slightly, a silent O forming on his lips. "Nexus Dynamics," Dr. Petrova said, the words coming out slowly, as if she were processing a complex algorithm. "That's the company that is the primary sponsor of this entire 3-day summit." The lobby buzzed with 1,000 hushed whispers. The executives who had been so eager to record the confrontation now began to lower their phones, a look of uncertainty on their faces. Mr. Dubois, the hotel manager, looked as if he was about to vomit onto the pristine marble floor. Catherine's laugh was now thin and reedy. "That is utterly impossible. The CEO of Nexus Dynamics is some tech mogul from Silicon Valley." "The CEO of Nexus Dynamics is what?" A new voice, calm and full of authority, entered the fray. Congresswoman Eleanor Hayes, who had just stepped off a private elevator with her security staff, strode toward the group. The 72-year-old African-American woman, a legend in Washington, commanded instant and total respect. "Congresswoman Hayes," Catherine stammered, her aggressive stance crumbling. "I wasn't aware you would be attending." "I am delivering the keynote address," the Congresswoman stated coolly. "My topic is the imperative of diversity in 21st century corporate leadership. This seems timely." Her gaze shifted to Eliana, then to the business card still in Officer Miller's hand. "May I?" The officer handed it to her. The Congresswoman studied it for a second, then looked directly at Eliana with a warm smile. "Ms. Vance, it is a true honor to finally meet you in person." The words landed with the force of a physical blow. A hush fell over the assembled crowd. Smartphones swiveled back to Eliana, who had remained poised and still through the entire ordeal, her expression completely unreadable. Catherine's voice was a ragged whisper. You know her?" "I know of her," the Congresswoman corrected, her voice carrying easily. "Nexus Dynamics is one of the fastest-growing technology firms in the nation. They were founded 10 years ago and are now valued at over $5 billion. Ms. Vance was featured on the cover of Forbes last month as one of the most innovative young CEOs in America." The ensuing silence was absolute. Mr. Dubois, the manager, looked as though he was actively praying for the floor to open up and swallow him whole. The executives who had tacitly supported Catherine now melted away, suddenly engrossed in their own phones. But Catherine wasn't done. A cornered animal is the most dangerous. "I don't care what magazine she was on," she seethed, her voice strained. "This is a private summit. And if she's so important, where is her VIP badge? Where is her security detail? Why is she dressed like—" She gestured dismissively at Eliana's tasteful but simple outfit. "Like what?" Congresswoman Hayes' voice was dangerously low. "Like she cannot afford the proper designer labels?" Catherine snapped, tripling down on her catastrophic misjudgment. The crowd gasped audibly. Even her last remaining supporters now backed away, leaving Catherine standing alone, exposed and isolated in the center of the lobby. "Catherine, You need to stop talking. Right now, Dr. Petrova warned. But Catherine was past the point of reason. Her face was flushed, her hands were shaking, and her voice held the frantic, desperate energy of someone watching their entire world burn down around them. No, I have been attending these functions for 20 years. I know who is supposed to be here and who is not. I don't care about her business card or some magazine article, just look at her. Does she look like a billionaire CEO to you? It's a powerful moment, the great reveal. Suddenly, the roles are reversed. The accuser is now the accused, and the victim holds all the cards. We've all seen movies with this scene, but witnessing the sheer whiplash of the power shift, even in a story, is breathtaking. How many times have we judged someone based on their appearance, their youth, or the color of their skin? It's a sobering question to ask ourselves how many Eliana Vances we have dismissed because they didn't match our mental image of authority and success. Eliana finally broke her silence. Her voice was quiet, yet it commanded the attention of everyone present. You're right about one thing, Catherine. Every eye was fixed on her. I don't look like most CEOs. I'm too young, I'm too black, I'm too female, and I'm definitely not dressed to your standards. She paused, letting the truth of her words land. But that is precisely the point. She reached back into her portfolio. This time, she pulled out a slim leather folio. Inside was her VIP Summit badge, not the standard one the other attendees wore, but a solid platinum access card reserved for keynote speakers and the primary event sponsors. But there was something else tucked inside the folio. Something that made Officer Miller's eyes go wide and brought a grim, satisfied smile to Congresswoman Hayes's lips. A second business card, identical in quality to the first, but with different words. Eliana Vance, majority shareholder, Thorn Communications Group, Catherine's company. The communications firm she had built her career at over 15 years, clawing her way up to executive vice president of client accounts through a mixture of talent, aggression, and calculated cruelty. The company that Eliana Vance had quietly, legally, and irrevocably acquired 2 weeks ago through a holding company, with the intention of announcing the acquisition at this very summit. Dr. Petrova was the first to see the second card. Her sharp intake of breath was the signal. Julian Reed's camera captured the wave of understanding as it washed over the crowd. Catherine, however, remained oblivious, still ranting about protocol and procedure, her voice a shrill counterpoint to the quiet unfolding of her professional demise. And another thing, I believe we need to have a serious review of how these invitations are screened in the future. Because if just anyone can… Catherine. Congresswoman Hayes's voice cut through her monologue like a surgeon's scalpel. Do you have any idea who signs your paycheck? The question stopped Catherine cold. She looked around, confusion warring with anger on her face. What? I work for Thorn Communications. Jonathan Thorn signs my… Jonathan Thorn sold the company 2 weeks ago, the Congresswoman said, her tone gentle, as if delivering a somber diagnosis, to a private equity firm. That firm was acting on behalf of… She gestured elegantly toward Eliana. Catherine's face cycled through a series of emotions: bafflement, denial, dawning horror, and then utter devastation. It looked as if her knees might buckle. That's impossible. Eliana spoke again, her voice still low and steady, a tone that somehow carried more weight than Catherine's shouting ever had. It's not just possible, Catherine. The deal is already done. The final paperwork was filed with the state of Illinois yesterday. I am now the majority owner and chairman of the board of Thorn Communications Group. She let the words settle. Which means, I'm your boss. Here it is. The knockout punch. the moment that transforms the story from a confrontation into a complete conquest. Imagine the sheer strategic brilliance. To not just defeat your adversary, but to own the ground she stands on, to own her past and her future. Is this poetic justice, a kind of corporate karma? Or is it something more? A cold, calculated maneuver that demonstrates a level of power far beyond what anyone in that lobby could have imagined. What do you think this move says about Eliana's character? The lobby was so still that you could hear the faint whisper of the air conditioning. Catherine's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Her one-time supporters had vanished into the woodwork. Some were literally backing away, as if her career implosion was a communicable disease. But Eliana wasn't done. And as the new chairman of Thorn Communications, I now have access to all internal company records, including your employee file. Her eyes locked with Catherine's. I've reviewed 12 separate formal complaints that have been filed against you for discriminatory behavior and creating a hostile work environment. 7 of those were settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. 4 employees resigned specifically citing your conduct as the primary reason. Each word was a hammer blow. Catherine's face had gone from a blotchy red to a deathly ashen white. So when you ask me if I belong here, Eliana continued, the answer is yes. I belong here because I own here. I own this summit. I own the company that you work for, and as of yesterday morning, I own your contract. The full scope of the new reality crashed down on Catherine like a physical weight. Her career, her reputation, her entire professional life now rested in the hands of the woman she had just assaulted and publicly humiliated. Officer Miller cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "Ma'am," he said to Eliana, "given this new information, are you wishing to file charges at this time?" Every eye in the lobby swung to Eliana. In that moment, she held the power to utterly and completely destroy Catherine Thorn. One word, and Catherine would be arrested for assault, her public disgrace complete, her professional life over. The crowd held its breath. The silence was a tangible thing, a taut wire vibrating with tension. Catherine's breathing was now ragged and audible in the cavernous lobby, the quick, shallow gasps of a snared animal. A bead of sweat trickled down her temple, tracing a path through her expensive foundation, despite the hotel's climate-controlled air. Eliana observed Catherine's collapse with the detached focus of a research scientist studying a specimen under a microscope. The power inversion was so total, so absolute, that the very atmosphere in the room seemed to have changed, charged with a new kind of electricity. Charges? Eliana repeated the word softly, as if it belonged to a foreign language. Officer Miller, what would be the standard charges for an individual who physically assaults another person without their consent, makes a series of racially charged and defamatory statements in a public forum, and then knowingly files a false police report? Miller glanced down at his notepad, his voice formal. That would be assault and battery, public nuisance, harassment, potentially a civil rights violation charge depending on the state's attorney's office, and filing a false report. The last one is a misdemeanor, but the combination of the others. He gave a slight, meaningful shrug. The unspoken possibilities hung in the air. At that moment, Catherine's composure finally shattered. Her legs gave way, and she crumpled into one of the plush leather armchairs that dotted the lobby. Her Chanel bag slipped from her grasp, hitting the marble with a startling thud. Its contents, a lipstick, a platinum credit card, a small stack of her own business cards, scattered across the floor like prophecies of a fallen empire. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I made a terrible mistake. I didn't realize who you were." "No." Eliana's voice was firm, carrying a weight that seemed to press down on the entire room. "You knew exactly who I was in your mind. A black woman. And in your world, that was all you needed to know to decide I didn't belong." Dr. Petrova stepped forward, her expression a mix of awe and dismay. "Eliana, how long have you actually owned Thorn Communications?" 2 weeks, 3 days, and about 5 hours, Eliana said, glancing at a simple, functional smartwatch on her wrist. The unassuming device suddenly seemed far more intimidating than any Rolex. "But the acquisition was completely under wraps," Julian Reed interjected, his journalistic curiosity overriding everything else. "There was no press release, no filing with the SEC that tied your name to the deal." Eliana offered the first hint of a smile since the ordeal began. It was not a warm expression. "Holding companies are remarkably useful instruments. Crestwood Equity Partners acquired Thorn Communications for a cash price of $78.5 million. Crestwood Equity is a subsidiary of the Meridian Group. The Meridian Group is wholly owned by Vance Enterprises." She let that name sink in. "Vance Enterprises is my family's private investment firm, founded by my great-grandmother in Chicago in 1958. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through a document, reading aloud as if from a script. "Through Vance Enterprises, we also hold a majority stake in Atherton Hotel Group, the corporation that manages this very building." Her eyes flicked toward Mr. Dubois, who looked as if he might faint. "We also own Sterling PR, the firm that handles crisis communications for about half of the companies represented here today. And as of last quarter, Midwest Regional Airlines, the charter service that flew in 22 of this morning's summit attendees." Each new revelation sent a fresh shockwave through the room. Executives were now openly on their phones, their faces a mixture of panic and astonishment as they texted lawyers and advisors. The hashtag #AthertonAmbush was now the #1 trend on Twitter in North America. "And," Eliana continued, "we have a significant stake in the Hayes media conglomerate." She nodded toward the Congresswoman, who watched the proceedings with a look of deep admiration. "Which gives me access to some of the best investigative journalism in the country, especially their award-winning work on employment practices within the marketing and communications industry." Catherine's head snapped up. "What are you trying to say?" "I am saying, Catherine, that your behavior this morning was not an isolated incident. It was the latest data point in a well-established pattern." Eliana's voice remained calm, but her words were surgically precise. "And I have made it my business to document patterns." She tapped her phone again, and a secure corporate database unlocked with her thumbprint. "Thorn Communications' client churn rate has increased by 32% over the last 3 fiscal years. Your former CEO, Jonathan Thorn, was staring down the barrel of 3 separate class action lawsuits, all centered on discrimination claims originating in your department. Several other Thorn Communications employees, who had been hovering at the edges of the crowd, now began to discreetly inch toward the hotel's main exit. "But here is the truly fascinating part," Eliana said, her tone almost conversational. "Jonathan Thorn was fully aware of all of this. He was hemorrhaging cash on legal settlements, his client list was shrinking, and he was facing regulatory inquiries. He was desperate for an exit." She raised her voice to address the entire lobby. "So, when an anonymous buyer came to him and offered $78 million for a company that was, on paper, maybe worth $50, he didn't bother with due diligence. He was so eager to unload his toxic asset that he agreed to an accelerated closing." Congresswoman Hayes let out a rich, warm laugh that seemed to shatter the tension. "You bought her entire company out from under her just to have the pleasure of firing her yourself?" Congresswoman, firing her would be the merciful and simple option, Eliana replied. The words fell into the silence like stones into a deep well. Catherine's face turned a pale, ghostly gray. You see, Catherine, I'm not actually interested in revenge. I'm interested in transformation. And lasting transformation requires a systemic, comprehensive approach. Here is the turning point. The choice between simple justice and something more profound. Eliana could have the police escort Catherine away in disgrace. The story would end there, a satisfying but simple tale of comeuppance. But she chooses not to. What does this decision tell us? Is this a calculated move to gain even more power, or is it a genuine act of a different kind of justice, one that aims to rebuild rather than just punish? If you had that power, which path would you choose? Eliana's phone buzzed with a scheduled call. She glanced at the screen. Mark Esposito, Chief Legal Officer. She answered it, putting it on speaker. Mark, can you give me the status update? Everything is filed, stamped, and processed. His voice came through, crisp and efficient. The board resolution passed unanimously 15 minutes ago. You have full and unilateral operational control, effective now. Excellent. And the other items? HR has the termination and restructuring documents drafted. The legal team has collated the discovery from the discrimination lawsuits, and the PR department has the official press release awaiting your final sign-off. Press release? Catherine choked out the words. Eliana ended the call and met her gaze. Thorn Communications Group is announcing a full corporate restructuring effective today. We are installing new management, a new code of conduct, and a new corporate culture. There will be a zero-tolerance policy for any form of discriminatory behavior, which will be enforced by an independent external oversight committee. She pulled up another document on her phone. We will also be announcing the creation of the Thorn Equity Initiative, a $20 million fund dedicated to supporting minority and women-owned businesses in the communications sector. This initiative will be funded entirely by, let's call them efficiency gains, realized from the corporate restructuring. The crowd finally began to grasp the sheer scale of what was happening. This was never just about firing one problematic executive. This was about dismantling an entire discriminatory ecosystem and using its resources to build something better. Dr. Petrova stepped closer. The potential liability from those class action lawsuits must have been well over $20 million. Precisely, Eliana confirmed. By strategically restructuring, we are redirecting resources from legal defense and settlements toward proactive, positive change. Her smile was sharper now. It is truly amazing how much capital you can find for worthy causes when you stop wasting it on propping up bad actors. Catherine attempted to stand, swayed on her feet, and collapsed back into the chair. You can't do this to me. I have an employment contract. You had a contract, Eliana corrected gently, with the former ownership structure of Thorn Communications. Your contract, like all senior executive agreements, contains a morality clause. Your behavior here this morning constitutes a flagrant, publicly documented violation of that clause. She gestured to the dozens of phones still aimed at them. We have multiple video recordings of you committing assault, making defamatory and racially biased statements, and filing a false police report. Any competent employment lawyer in the country would agree that this is grounds for immediate termination with cause. Officer Miller cleared his throat again. Ma'am, returning to the matter of those charges. Eliana considered for a long, weighted moment. The lobby waited. Catherine sat like a broken doll, her face buried in her hands. Officer, I genuinely appreciate your professionalism here this morning, Eliana said finally. But I believe this particular situation has resolved itself. Sometimes the most meaningful justice is the kind that happens outside of a courtroom. Miller nodded, closing his notepad. As you wish. If you reconsider, we have a complete record of the incident. As the two police officers departed, Eliana turned back to Catherine. Her expression had softened. The cold, surgical precision was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like pity. Catherine, 15 years ago, you started at this company as a smart, ambitious young woman who wanted to make a name for herself in a tough industry. I understand that ambition. I respect it. But at some point on your journey, you came to believe that the only way to climb the ladder was to kick other people off of it. Catherine looked up, her eyes vacant. I worked so hard, she whispered. I gave my entire life to that job. I know you did, Eliana said, her voice now softer, though no less authoritative. And that is the real tragedy in all of this. You are not an evil person, Catherine. You are a wounded person who was taught that the way to deal with your own wounds was to inflict them on others. But that pattern, that cycle, ends today. From her portfolio, she produced a simple manila envelope, something else she had been carrying all along. This is your severance package. It includes 9 months' salary, continued health benefits, and a letter of reference that will focus on your strategic skills rather than your interpersonal challenges. It also includes contact information for several top-tier executive coaching and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, which we are prepared to fund. Catherine stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. There is one condition, Eliana said. You will issue a formal public apology. Not to me. I don't need or want your apology. You will apologize to every person you have belittled, harassed, or discriminated against during your tenure at Thorn Communications, and you will commit yourself to the work of doing better. The atmosphere in the room had shifted again. The tension was gone, replaced by a sense of hushed expectancy. It felt as if everyone was waiting to see if Grace could truly exist in the cutthroat corporate world. Catherine's hands shook as she reached out and took the envelope. Why? She asked, her voice a raw whisper. After what I did to you, why are you doing this? Because this was never just about you, Catherine, Eliana replied. This is about all the other Catherines in all the other companies who believe that their behavior is acceptable. This is about creating a business world where Black women do not have to acquire entire corporations just to be treated with basic human dignity and respect. She scanned the room, making eye contact with the executives who remained, their faces a catalog of shock, contemplation, and dawning understanding. And this is about demonstrating to everyone here today that real power, true strength, is not about building walls to keep people out. It's about opening doors so wide that no one can ever slam them shut again. The applause began with a single person, Congresswoman Hayes, clapping slowly and deliberately. Then Dr. Petrova joined. Then Julian Reed. Within moments, the entire lobby was filled with the sound of thunderous, sustained applause. Clutching the envelope, Catherine Thorn began to cry. Not the angry, frustrated tears of before, but the deep, soul-cleansing sobs of someone who has carried a poison for so long they forgot what it felt like to be free of it. But even as the lobby applauded and Catherine wept, Eliana Vance's expression remained focused and resolute. She knew what none of them yet understood. This was not the end. This was merely the overture. The real work was about to begin. The offer of redemption is perhaps the most powerful move of all. Instead of crushing her opponent, Eliana offers her a path forward, a chance to rebuild not just her career, but her character. It's a move that defies the typical revenge narrative. Do you believe that people who commit such acts of prejudice deserve a second chance? Is this offer an act of incredible grace, a brilliant strategic maneuver to turn an enemy into an asset? Or both? The executive conference room on the 50th floor of the Atherton Grand offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the Chicago skyline and Lake Michigan. But none of the 20 executives who had made it upstairs were looking out the windows. Catherine sat at the very end of the long mahogany table, a solitary figure in a sea of empty chairs, looking at the severance envelope as if it held the secrets to the universe. Eliana stood at the head of the table, her laptop open. The large screen on the wall behind her displayed the elegant minimalist logo of Nexus Dynamics. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice calm and clear, "thank you for your patience. I realize this morning's events have been unorthodox." A few nervous laughs broke the tension. Dr. Petrova had taken the seat closest to Eliana, a clear sign of her alliance. Congresswoman Hayes sat near the window, a regal and observant presence. Julian Reed had positioned himself to record the reactions around the table, his phone now on a small tripod. "Before we start the planned summit agenda," Eliana said, advancing her presentation, "I believe it is crucial that we unpack what happened in the lobby. Not just the specific incident, but what it signifies." The screen behind her filled with charts and data. The hard, irrefutable numbers caused several executives to shift uneasily in their expensive leather chairs. Workplace discrimination and hostile environment lawsuits cost U.S. businesses over $70 billion a year in settlements, legal fees, lost productivity, and employee attrition. Click. Companies that rank in the top quartile for executive-level diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their national industry medians. Click. And yet, 80% of Fortune 500 companies have never had a black woman in a C-suite position. Catherine did not look up, but Eliana could see she was listening. These are not just abstract statistics, they are symptoms of a fundamentally broken system. A system that squanders human potential and financial capital on an epic scale, Eliana stated. That system is costing every single person in this room money. She clicked again, and a complex network diagram appeared on the screen with Thorn Communications at its center, with lines radiating out to dozens of other corporate logos, many of whom were represented at this table. "This is why I didn't just acquire a single communications firm," she explained. "I acquired an entire ecosystem." Her laser pointer traced the connections. 19 of your companies retain Thorn for your primary marketing campaigns. 32 of you use their PR and crisis management services. 45 of you have interlocking partnerships or supply chain contracts that are managed through their network. The full weight of the situation began to settle in. Executives started discreetly tapping messages on their phones to their legal departments. Dr. Petrova leaned in. "You're making the case that a toxic culture at Thorn Communications was a systemic risk to the entire network." Precisely. When an executive like Catherine discriminates, it doesn't just harm one individual. It sends ripples of damage and liability across the whole system. It poisons the well for everyone. Eliana advanced to a new slide, a financial analysis that made the room fall deathly silent. Over the past 3 years, the companies represented in this room have collectively paid out over $150 million in discrimination and harassment settlements. That figure does not include legal fees, which we estimate at an additional $50 million, or the loss of contracts and business opportunities, which our analysts place at over $300 million in unrealized revenue. The numbers, totaling $500 million, hung in the air like a toxic cloud. "That is $500 million in completely preventable losses," Eliana said, her voice relentless. Money that could have been reinvested in innovation, shareholder dividends, or talent development. Instead, it was incinerated in legal battles and PR disasters. Congresswoman Hayes spoke for the first time. "So what is your proposed solution, Ms. Vance?" Eliana's smile was now collaborative. "I am proposing that we work together to fix the broken system, systematically, permanently." A new slide appeared. The Nexus Equity Protocol. Starting today, every company that wishes to remain part of the Thorn network, and by extension do business with Nexus Dynamics, will be required to adopt a new, standardized set of operating protocols. This includes mandatory, evidence-based anti-discrimination and inclusive leadership training for all management, with annual recertification. Click. It includes the implementation of real-time monitoring systems that use AI to track hiring data, pay equity, promotion rates, and complaint resolutions, flagging biases before they escalate into lawsuits. Click. And it includes a mandatory independent oversight program, not internal HR departments, but external third-party auditing firms that will conduct regular, unannounced cultural health assessments. These were not suggestions. They were terms. A voice from the other end of the table, a CEO named Harrison, finally spoke up. "And what if we decline to participate?" Eliana's expression remained placid, but the energy in the room grew colder. "That is, of course, your prerogative, Mr. Harrison, but it's worth noting that Nexus Dynamics' financial services division processed nearly $1 billion in transactions last year. Approximately 30 million of that was for your company. We provide our services to partners who align with our core values. If your values no longer align with ours, there are other, albeit less efficient and more expensive, service providers you can seek out." Harrison's face paled. Dr. Petrova was studying the presentation. "This is about far more than just Thorn Communications, isn't it? You have been building this for years." 3 years, Eliana corrected. "Ever since we lost 3 of our most brilliant young engineers, all women of color, because of the toxic interactions they faced not inside our company, but with our partners and clients." The screen showed 3 photos of smiling young women. Dr. Aisha Sharma, a PhD from Caltech. She left after a partner executive told her she was too articulate for a woman of her background. Maria Flores, a cybersecurity genius who single-handedly saved us from a $40 million ransomware attack. She resigned after being mistaken for a coffee server at a client meeting for the 3rd time. The images were more impactful than any data point. "We lost them," Eliana said, her voice filled with quiet anger. "Because we did not do enough to protect them from the Catherines of the world." Catherine flinched. "So yes, I have been planning this. Mapping the networks, acquiring the key assets, and building the legal framework to force the change that the market refused to make on its own." She clicked to a timeline. "Within 6 months, every company in this network will be operating under the new equity protocol." Julian Reed spoke. "If this works, what is your endgame?" The presentation switched to a global map, with networks spreading from North America to Europe and Asia. "We scale it. Nexus Dynamics has partnerships in 15 countries. Once we prove that embedding equity into a corporate ecosystem is not a cost center, but a significant competitive advantage, it will become the new gold standard. Others will have to adopt it to compete." The sheer, breathtaking scope of her vision silenced the room. This wasn't just fixing a company. It was a plan to re-engineer the foundational principles of global capitalism. The goal is not to punish the Catherines, Eliana said, her eyes finding the broken woman at the end of the table. The goal is to create an ecosystem where the next Catherine never develops in the first place, where discrimination is not just morally reprehensible, but economically untenable. Congresswoman Hayes was nodding. A market-based solution for a deeply ingrained social problem. It's brilliant. It is the only solution that can scale, Eliana replied. She closed her laptop. So who is ready to build a more equitable and more profitable future? The room was silent for a long moment, the executives processing the paradigm shift. Then, one by one, they began to signal their assent. Wong Industries, Harrison's logistics firm, Morrison Media. 18 companies, representing tens of billions in market cap, had just signed on to a revolution. Catherine finally looked up. Her voice was a bare whisper. What happens to me? All eyes turned to Eliana. The room waited. What would be a truly satisfying ending? Is it watching a powerful person build something new from the ashes of the old system? This isn't just a story about one woman's victory anymore. It's a blueprint for systemic change. It makes you think, what are the deeply ingrained, unsolvable problems in our own lives or workplaces that are just waiting for someone to map the entire ecosystem and find the courage to buy it? Eliana studied Catherine's tear-streaked face for a long moment before she spoke. The air in the conference room was thick with anticipation. 20 executives were poised, waiting to see how this immense power would ultimately be wielded, with the cold finality of justice or the transformative potential of mercy. Catherine, Eliana said, her voice now devoid of its earlier edge. What do you believe should happen to you? The unexpected question seemed to startle Catherine more than any verdict could have. She blinked, as if the idea of agency in her own fate was a foreign concept. I don't know, she stammered. I should be fired. I deserve to be humiliated. I deserve all of this. Her voice cracked with genuine remorse. I became a person I don't even recognize, a person my own parents would be ashamed of. Eliana rose and walked slowly around the long mahogany table, her heels sinking into the plush carpeting. She came to a stop beside Catherine's chair, not towering over her, but standing beside her. 4 months ago, Nexus Dynamics engaged a sociologist from the University of Chicago, a woman named Dr. Anya Sharma. Her research focused on a phenomenon she calls survival toxicity, the idea that individuals in hyper-competitive, high-stress environments often adopt toxic behaviors, not because they are inherently bad people, but as a misguided survival mechanism. Victoria looked up, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. For 15 years, the culture at Thorn Communications rewarded you for being ruthless, for being territorial, for seeing colleagues as rivals and inclusion as a threat. The system incentivized the very behavior that led to this moment. That company forged you into this version of yourself. Around the table, several executives shifted uncomfortably, recognizing a reflection of their own corporate cultures in Eliana's words. But here is the other part of Dr. Sharma's research, Eliana continued. She found that people are remarkably capable of change, of deprogramming, when the incentive structures are fundamentally altered, when collaboration is shown to be more profitable than cutthroat competition, when diversity is proven to be a catalyst for innovation. Eliana pulled out the adjacent chair and sat down next to Catherine, a simple gesture of empathy that sent a new shockwave through the room. So, here is what is going to happen, she said. You will resign from Thorn Communications today with the generous severance package we've offered. But your resignation is conditional upon your enrollment as the first participant in our new Executive Transformation Program. Dr. Petrova leaned forward, intrigued. Transformation program? 6 months of intensive one-on-one work with Dr. Sharma and her team, Eliana explained. This is not a punishment. It's an education. It's about understanding the sociological and psychological drivers of bias. It's about developing the skills of inclusive leadership. It is about learning to re-engineer your professional toolkit for the new economy. You're giving me a second chance? Catherine whispered. I'm offering you the tools and the opportunity to earn a second chance, Eliana clarified. The program is rigorous. It will require absolute honesty, painful self-reflection, and a willingness to unlearn much of what you thought you knew about success. She slid a tablet across the table, displaying a detailed curriculum. 12 weeks of individual coaching, followed by 8 weeks of leading group sessions with other executives, culminating in 4 weeks of a supervised mentorship role with a startup founded by minority women. The silence in the room was profound. This was not the corporate execution they had anticipated. This was something radical, a form of restorative justice applied to the corporate world. And upon your successful completion of the program, Eliana went on, you will have an option. You can take your new certification in inclusive leadership to any other company. Or, she paused, letting the final piece of her strategy fall into place. You can come to work for Nexus Dynamics as our new Vice President of Cultural Transformation, tasked with helping our other network partners implement these same programs. Catherine's jaw dropped. Around the table, looks of utter astonishment were exchanged. The woman who had been the villain of the story, the catalyst for this revolution, was now being offered a path to redemption that could lead to a more influential and powerful position than the one she had just lost. Why? Catherine asked again, her voice full of genuine disbelief. After what I did? Eliana's smile was finally, completely genuine. Because, Catherine, transforming you changes everything. Your story, your journey from being the problem to becoming the architect of the solution will be more powerful and more persuasive than any diversity slideshow I could ever present. She stood and addressed the room. This is what real systemic change looks like. It is not about destroying those who have made mistakes. It is about giving them the tools and the incentives to become champions of the solution. Congresswoman Hayes was nodding slowly. You're turning your greatest adversary into your most powerful advocate. That is brilliant political and business strategy. Marcus Thompson, who had been quietly filming, spoke for the first time. This is truly a new model, restorative justice as a tool for corporate governance. The old model of simply firing a person and hoping their replacement is better is a proven failure, Eliana said. It treats the symptom, not the disease. This model inoculates the entire system. She turned back to Catherine. So what will it be, Catherine? Are you ready to do the work to become the leader you always could have been? Victoria looked at the faces around the table, the very people who had watched her spectacular fall from grace, who were now witnessing her impossible offer of resurrection. Yes, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Yes, I want to do the work. I want to be better. The applause that followed was not the thunderous ovation from the lobby. It was quieter, more thoughtful, more profound. It was the sound of 20 of the most powerful people in the city realizing they had just witnessed the birth of a new idea. There's one last thing, Eliana said, turning back to her laptop. The final slide appeared. The Executive Transformation Program is not just for Catherine. A refined version will now be a mandatory requirement for C-suite succession at every company within the Nexus network. Think of it not as a remedial course, but as the new MBA, a master's in building actual, profitable, and inclusive teams. The revolution was complete. 6 months later, the same conference room was filled with over 200 people. The Nexus Equity Summit was now the hottest ticket in the corporate world. Eliana stood at the podium to introduce the keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor to introduce a woman whose journey embodies the principles of this movement. Please welcome our Vice President of Cultural Transformation, Catherine Thorne. The applause was deafening as a new Catherine walked to the stage. She was confident, but not arrogant. Her smile was authentic. 6 months ago, in this very hotel, she began, I was the living embodiment of everything wrong with our corporate culture. I saw a brilliant black woman, and my first instinct was to see a threat. I was wrong. I was publicly, horribly, and unforgivably wrong. The audience was rapt. But Eliana Vance and Nexus Dynamics did not just end my career. They gave me the opportunity to build a new one, a better one. The screen behind her showed the results of the program. 53 executives have now graduated from the program. Together, our companies have seen a 40% increase in minority representation in management and a 60% decrease in employee turnover, adding over $400 million to our collective bottom line. This was the ultimate proof. Equity wasn't just good morals, it was great business. From her seat in the front row, Eliana watched with a sense of profound satisfaction. The woman who was once a symbol of prejudice had become her most effective agent of change. This is just the beginning, Catherine concluded, looking directly into the camera that was live streaming her speech globally. Real change happens when every one of us chooses to do better. The standing ovation was long and heartfelt. As the summit ended, Eliana's phone buzzed. It was a message from the dean of Harvard Business School. They wanted to make the Nexus Protocol a core part of their MBA curriculum. The change was no longer just a corporate initiative. It was becoming a movement. And it had all started with one woman who refused to be told she didn't belong. And so the story ends. Not with a simple victory, but with the beginning of a transformation that ripples outwards. It's a powerful narrative of change, but it leaves us with a critical question. Is this just an idealistic tale? Or can this kind of profound change actually take root in the real world? The story suggests that it all begins when one person chooses to see a moment of ugly conflict not as an end, but as a beginning. It makes you ask, what is the next chapter of this story, and what role are you going to play in writing it?